The message came in peace. At least, that's what it claimed. The Galactic Concord, a coalition of over 300 advanced civilizations, had finally decided to make contact with humanity. For decades, they had watched Earth from afar, studying its wars, its fragile unity, and its rapid technological growth. To them, humans were unpredictable, dangerous perhaps, but still primitive. So they sent diplomats. The alien vessel entered the solar system slowly, broadcasting greetings in 1,000 translated languages. It was elegant, sleek, glowing with soft blue energy, designed to inspire trust rather than fear. Earth responded within minutes. Unidentified vessel, you are entering controlled space. State your purpose. The diplomats exchanged glances. Controlled space? The Concord's lead envoy, Ambassador Kirel, straightened. We come in peace. We represent the Galactic Concord and wish to establish first contact with your species. There was a pause. Then Earth replied. Understood. You are cleared to approach, but remain on your current trajectory. Kirel frowned slightly. Remain? Before he could question further, their sensors lit up. Something massive was moving. At first, they thought it was a moon. Then the readings updated. It wasn't a moon, it was a ship. Silence filled the diplomatic vessel as the object emerged from behind Earth's orbit. It dwarfed anything the Concorde had ever built. Kilometers long, no, tens of kilometers, layer upon layer of armored plating, each section bristling with weapons that defied classification. Energy signatures surged across its surface like storms trapped in metal. And at its core, a weapon, something so powerful their instruments struggled to even measure it. Impossible, one of the scientists whispered. Kirel's voice trembled. Is that a defense platform? The human response came calmly. That is a Titan-class warship, designation Aegis Prime. The diplomats felt something they had not experienced in centuries: fear. Why deploy such a vessel to greet peaceful envoys? The human response was immediate. We didn't deploy it. It's always been here. The meaning sank in slowly. This wasn't a show of force. This was normal. More readings flooded in. Hidden signatures, dozens, no, hundreds of massive objects lurking throughout the solar system, cloaked, silent, watching, each one comparable to the Titan-class ship now drifting into full view. The Concorde had believed they were observing a developing civilization. In reality, they had been allowed to observe. Kirel steadied himself. We meant no threat. We come with offers of alliance, shared knowledge, and peace. The human voice softened slightly. We understand. That's why you're still here. On the bridge of the diplomatic vessel, no one spoke. The implication was clear. The Titan-class warship adjusted its position, its enormous structure casting a shadow over their sensors. Its weapon systems powered down, just enough to signal restraint, not weakness. Then something unexpected happened. A smaller ship detached from the Titan. Compared to its parent vessel, it was tiny, barely a few hundred meters long, but to the diplomats, it still felt overwhelming. This is a transport. We'll send a delegation to meet you halfway. Kirel hesitated. You trust us? There was a brief silence. Then the human answered. No. Another pause. But we're willing to try. The transport approached, steady and unafraid. Inside, the Concorde representatives prepared themselves. They had come expecting to meet a young species, one eager to join a greater galactic community. Instead, they had discovered something far more unsettling, a civilization that had grown in isolation, forged in conflict, and quietly built weapons capable of challenging the stars themselves. As the airlock doors opened and humans stepped aboard, Kirel finally understood the truth. Humanity had never needed protection. They were the protection. And for the first time in its long history, the Galactic Concord realized it was not welcoming a new member. It was negotiating with a power that had already surpassed them.
The airlock sealed behind them with a soft hiss. For a moment, no one moved. Ambassador Kirel stood face to face with humanity for the first time. They looked ordinary. No glowing skin, no advanced bioaugmentations visible, no overwhelming presence. Just humans. And yet, outside that hull, floated a machine capable of erasing civilizations. "Welcome aboard," the human representative said calmly. He wore a simple uniform, dark, unadorned, with a small insignia over his chest. Commander Elias Ward, United Earth Defense. Kirel blinked. Defense? His voice carried a hint of disbelief. Ward noticed, but didn't react. Yes, defense. The meeting room was surprisingly minimal. No grand displays, no intimidation tactics, just a table, chairs, and a viewport. Kirel quickly realized why. The viewport faced the Titan-class warship. Aegis Prime filled the stars. "You built that for defense?" one of the Concord scientists asked, unable to hide their skepticism. Ward folded his hands. "We built it because we had to." Kirel leaned forward. Had to? Against whom? For the first time, Ward hesitated. Not out of fear, out of choice. "Before we answer that," Ward said, "you should understand something." He tapped the console. The stars outside shifted. At first, the diplomats thought it was a visual glitch. Then the truth hit them. Those weren't stars. They were ships. Dozens of Titan-class vessels decloaked across the solar system, each one positioned with terrifying precision, each one silent, watching, waiting. A gasp escaped from one of the diplomats. This is impossible." Kirel's voice dropped to a whisper. "How long?" Ward answered plainly. "Long before you started watching us." Silence crushed the room. The Concord had monitored humanity for decades, studied their wars, their politics, their fragile alliances, and yet they had seen nothing. "You hid all of this?" Kirel asked. Ward nodded. "Of course." "Why?" "Because the moment the galaxy knows what you can do," he said quietly, "it changes how they treat you." Kirel felt a chill. "Is that what happened to you?" Ward didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned back to the viewport. "There are things in this galaxy you haven't encountered yet. Things older than your Concord. Things that don't send diplomats." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. One of the Concord scientists spoke nervously. "We have mapped most of the galaxy. There are no such civilizations recorded." Ward gave a small, almost amused smile. "That's because they don't live in the galaxy." The diplomats froze. 5 years ago, Ward continued, something entered our system. No signals, no warnings, just arrival. The stars flickered again. This time a recording appeared on the viewport. Something massive, distorted, wrong. It didn't look like a ship. It looked like a tear in space itself. It destroyed Pluto in under 3 seconds, Ward said flatly. No weapons fired, no energy signatures we could track. Just gone. No one in the room breathed. We threw everything at it, Ward continued. Fleets, nuclear payloads, experimental weapons. Nothing worked. Kirell swallowed. Then, how are you still here? Ward's eyes shifted slightly. To answer that, you need to see the next level. The viewport zoomed out, past Earth, past the orbit of Neptune, into deep, cold space. And then they saw it. Something even bigger than the Titan-class warships. Something so large it made Aegis Prime look insignificant. It wasn't just a warship. It was a fortress. A moving wall. Kirell's voice broke. What is that? Ward spoke one word. Leviathan. The diplomats stared in horror. That, Ward said quietly, is what stopped it. The recording resumed. The unknown entity, the thing that erased Pluto, moved again. Reality bent around it. Space twisted. Then the Leviathan fired. Not a beam, not a missile. Something else. Something that made the diplomats' instruments scream in protest. And the entity stopped. Not destroyed, not completely, but contained, held. Kirell staggered back into his chair. You're not building defenses against civilizations. Ward finally met his eyes. No. We are building defenses against extinction. Silence. Deep. Heavy. Unavoidable. After a long moment, Kirell spoke again, his voice no longer confident. What do you want from us? Ward's expression softened slightly. For now, he glanced towards the stars, towards the hidden fleet, towards the distant Leviathan. For now, nothing. A pause. But if more of those things come, his voice hardened, we expect you to be ready. The diplomats understood. This wasn't first contact. This wasn't diplomacy. This was a warning.
The warning came too late. It began with silence. Not the peaceful silence of space, but something deeper, unnatural. Across the outer edges of the solar system, human sensors began to fail, one by one, then all at once. On board Aegis Prime, alarms didn't sound. They simply stopped working. Commander Elias Ward stood frozen as the main display flickered. Report. No response. The crew stared at dead consoles, their instruments blank. Even the stars outside the viewport were gone. "What is happening?" Ambassador Kirell whispered, his voice barely audible. Ward didn't answer, because he already knew. It's back. As if responding to those words, space itself cracked. Not exploded, not tore. Cracked, like glass under pressure. And from that fracture, they emerged. Not one, not two, but dozens. The same entities that had erased Pluto. Only now they moved in formation. Silent, massive, unstoppable. The Concord diplomats stared in horror. This is impossible." Ward's voice was calm, but colder than ever. "No." A pause. "This is exactly what we were afraid of." Deep in the void beyond Neptune, the Leviathan moved. For the first time since its creation, the colossal fortress powered up at full capacity. Entire sections of its structure shifted, reconfiguring, awakening. Energy unlike anything the diplomats had ever seen surged through it. Not light, not heat, something else, something older. Kirell could barely speak. You built that for this?" Ward nodded. "Yes." Back on Earth, emergency protocols activated instantly. Hundreds of Titan-class warships decloaked. Defense grids came online. Planetary shields began to rise. Humanity didn't panic. They prepared. "Broadcast to all Concord channels," Ward ordered. "Now." Kirel looked at him in shock. "You're warning them?" Ward didn't even turn. "They deserve a chance." The message echoed across the stars. "Unknown entities have breached Sol system. This is not a territorial conflict. This is a survival event. If you can fight, prepare. If you can't, run." The entities advanced. One of them moved faster than the others. Reality warped around it. Space bent inward. And then it struck. A Titan-class warship vanished. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The Diplomats gasped. Ward clenched his jaw. Fire. The solar system lit up. Hundreds of Titan-class ships unleashed everything they had. Beams of concentrated energy, missile storms, gravitational distortions. The void itself seemed to burn. And yet, the entities kept coming. "They're not slowing down," a crew member shouted. Ward didn't react. "Hold formation." Then the Leviathan fired. Time stopped. At least, that's how it felt. A wave, not visible, not measurable, spread across space. It passed through ships, through planets, through reality itself. And when it touched the entities, they screamed. Not in sound, but in existence. Their forms twisted, collapsed, fought to remain whole. One by one, they began to fall. Kirel gripped the table, unable to process what he was seeing. What is that weapon?" Ward's voice was quiet. "We don't know." A pause. "We only know it works." But then something changed. One of the entities didn't collapse. It adapted. Its form stabilized, shifted, evolved. And then it turned. Not toward Earth, not toward the fleet, toward the Leviathan. Ward's eyes widened slightly. "That's new." The entity moved, faster than anything before. Reality shattered in its wake. "Leviathan, brace!" someone shouted. Too late. The entity struck. For the first time, the Leviathan moved backwards, just slightly, but enough. Enough to prove one thing: it wasn't invincible. Silence fell across every human ship, every station, every screen. Kirel felt it. That shift, that moment when certainty dies. "Can you stop it?" he asked, his voice shaking. Ward didn't answer immediately. He watched the battlefield, the collapsing entities, the advancing one, the Leviathan holding the line. Then he spoke. "No." The word hit harder than any weapon. "But we can slow it down." He turned to Kirel, and now, a pause, "we find out if the rest of the galaxy was worth saving." The stars flickered. Far beyond the solar system, signals appeared. Hundreds, then thousands. Ships, alien ships. The galactic Concord had answered. Kirel stared in disbelief. They came. Ward allowed himself a small smile. Good. He turned back to the battle, because we're going to need everyone. As the combined fleets of humanity and the galaxy surged forward, as the Leviathan prepared to fire again, as the entity from beyond reality evolved once more, one truth became clear. This was no longer humanity's war.
They thought they were ready. They weren't. The combined fleets of humanity and the galactic Concord stretched across the solar system like a wall of fire. Thousands of ships, hundreds of civilizations, all united for the first time in history. And still, it wasn't enough. The entity that had adapted, evolved, was no longer just surviving. It was learning. "Energy signature's changing!" a Concord scientist shouted. "It's adapting to weapon frequencies in real time." Beams that once damaged it now passed harmlessly through.
Missiles curved away as if reality itself rejected them. Even gravitational weapons began to fail. Commander Elias Ward stood firm. "Switch to randomized firing patterns, no repetition." Around him, human fleets adjusted instantly. But the alien fleets hesitated. They had never fought something like this. "Hold your lines," Kirel transmitted across the Concord network. "Follow human command protocols." For a brief moment, order returned. Then the void answered. More cracks. Not one, not 10, hundreds. Space shattered like glass across multiple sectors of the system, and from each fracture, more entities emerged. Kirel's voice broke. No, this isn't possible." Ward's expression hardened. "It's an incursion." "What does that mean?" "It means," Ward said quietly, "they're not invading." A pause. "They're arriving." The battlefield descended into chaos. Entire alien fleets were erased in seconds. Ships that had ruled galaxies for millennia gone without a trace. Human Titan-class warships held longer, but even they began to fall. "Aegis Prime taking heavy distortion damage," a crew member shouted. "Our shields are destabilizing." Ward didn't move. "Status of Leviathan?" A voice answered, shaken. "Leviathan is under pressure." That was impossible. The Leviathan was never supposed to be under pressure. On the far edge of the battlefield, the massive fortress fought alone against the evolved entity. Reality bent violently around them. Every second of combat distorted space further. And then, something worse happened. The other entities stopped attacking. They turned, all of them, toward the Leviathan. Kirel felt his breath catch. "They've identified it as the threat." Ward whispered under his breath. "No. They've identified it as the key." Before anyone could react, they moved. Hundreds of entities surged toward the Leviathan at once. "Intercept them," Ward ordered. Human fleets rushed forward. Alien ships followed. Everything they had, every weapon, every system fired at maximum capacity. Space lit up brighter than a star. But the entities didn't stop. They began to merge. One by one, they fused together, their forms collapsing into each other, growing, expanding, becoming something larger, something worse. Kirel stared in horror. "What are they doing?" Ward didn't answer, because he had no answer. Within moments, a new entity formed. It dwarfed everything, larger than the Leviathan, larger than anything ever recorded. And unlike the others, this one had shape, a structure, a purpose. It wasn't just a creature. It was a mind. The battlefield went silent. Even weapons fire began to fade, because everyone understood. This was not a wave, not a fleet. This was a commander. The entity moved, slowly, deliberately. And then it spoke. Not in sound, not in language, but in thought. Every mind across the battlefield felt it. Human, alien, didn't matter. A single message. "You were not meant to see us." Kirel collapsed to one knee, clutching his head. What is this?" Ward gritted his teeth, struggling to stay standing. "Something that doesn't recognize us as life." The entity continued. "Reality is a containment. You are a variable. You will be corrected." Across the battlefield, systems began to fail. Not damaged, not destroyed, erased. Ships flickered out of existence as if they had never been there. "We're losing entire sectors!" someone screamed. Ward looked toward the Leviathan. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "Can it stop that thing?" Kirel asked weakly. Ward answered honestly, "I don't know." Then, the Leviathan changed. Its entire structure began to unfold, layers upon layers opening, revealing something hidden at its core, something it had never used before. Energy surged, not outward, inward, compressing, collapsing. Curell's eyes widened. What is it doing? Ward's voice dropped to a whisper. It's not attacking. A pause. It's overriding reality. The entity reacted instantly. For the first time, it moved with urgency. It understood the threat, and it was afraid. Error detected. The message echoed across every mind. Correction required. The entity surged forward. The Leviathan charged. The fleets held their breath. And in that single moment, the fate of everything balanced on a line thinner than existence itself.
Everything stopped. Not slowed, not paused, stopped. The battlefield froze in a way no one could comprehend. Missiles hung motionless in space. Energy beams locked mid-flight. Even the stars themselves seemed suspended. Only two things still moved: the Leviathan and the entity. Commander Elias Ward felt it immediately. The shift, the pressure, the impossible weight of something rewriting the rules of existence. Curell couldn't even speak. His thoughts felt louder than reality. What is happening? Ward answered quietly. It's begun. At the core of the Leviathan, reality folded inward, not collapsing, but compressing into something smaller, denser, more precise. What is it doing? Curell whispered. Ward took a slow breath. It's solving. The entity reacted instantly. Unauthorized process. Termination required. It surged forward, but this time it didn't move through space. It rewrote it. Distance vanished, time bent, and suddenly it was there, right in front of the Leviathan. The two forces collided, but there was no explosion, no light, no sound, just change. Space twisted violently as both forces began to overwrite each other. Reality flickered like a corrupted signal. Curell screamed as visions flooded his mind. Stars forming, galaxies collapsing, civilizations rising and vanishing in an instant. This isn't a battle, he cried. Ward's voice was steady. No, it's a calculation. The entity expanded, its form fracturing into infinite variations, each one attempting a different outcome, every possible version of itself trying to win. The Leviathan responded. It adapted faster, not by changing shape, but by refining, simplifying. At its core, a single structure emerged. Not a weapon, a pattern, a perfect, unbreakable sequence. Curell stared, his mind barely holding together. What is that? Ward finally revealed the truth. It's the answer. Years ago, when the first entity arrived, humanity failed. Every weapon failed, every defense collapsed, until one thing worked. Not force, not destruction, understanding. They realized something impossible. The entities weren't alive, they were corrections. A system beyond reality, fixing what it considered errors. And humanity? Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had become an error that refused to be corrected. So we changed the rules, Ward said quietly. Curell's breath shook. You changed reality? Ward nodded. No. A pause. We learned how to speak to it. The Leviathan pulsed. The pattern expanded, not attacking the entity, but interacting with it, communicating. For the first time, the entity hesitated. Undefined, variable, logic, failure. The Leviathan pushed forward, not with power, but with truth, a contradiction, a paradox, something the system could not resolve. Curell felt it ripple through existence itself. What did you show it? Ward whispered. We choose to exist. The entity fractured, not destroyed,
but destabilized, its infinite forms collapsing into fewer and fewer possibilities. Error, error. The massive structure began to shrink, folding in on itself, retreating, not defeated, but unable to continue. The cracks in space began to seal. The other entities followed. One by one, they vanished, until only silence remained. The battlefield returned. Time resumed. Weapons completed their paths, firing into empty space. Ships reappeared where they had been frozen, and at the center of it all, the Leviathan dimmed, slowly, quietly, as if going back to sleep. Curell collapsed into his chair, breathing heavily. "It's over?" Ward stared out at the stars. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, "For now." Days later, the galaxy was no longer the same. The Galactic Concord didn't just recognize humanity, they followed them. Not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as something else. Guardians. Because now they all understood the truth. The universe wasn't empty, it wasn't peaceful, and it wasn't safe. It was being watched, measured, corrected. And somewhere beyond reality, the system was still there, learning, adapting, waiting. At the edge of the solar system, hidden in silence, the Leviathan remained, dormant but ready, because the next time the void returned, it might not hesitate, and neither would humanity.
The war was over, but the fear remained. For months, the galaxy stayed silent. No new fractures, no entities, no signs of the system. And that was the problem. "They're not gone," Ambassador Curell said during the emergency summit. "They're watching." This time, no one argued. The Galactic Concord had changed. Pride was gone. Certainty was gone. Now there was only one truth. Humanity had seen what lay beyond reality and survived. Commander Elias Ward stood before representatives of hundreds of civilizations. Behind him, a single image hovered in the air. A fracture, not from the battle, not from the invasion, something older. "We didn't win," Ward said calmly. "We delayed them." A murmur spread across the chamber. "They called reality a containment," Curell added. "That means there is something outside it." Ward nodded. "And we found a way to look back." Silence fell. "What do you mean?" one alien delegate asked nervously. Ward gestured. The image changed. Not a fracture this time. A signal. A pattern. The same pattern the Leviathan used. But different, Ward said. "This one didn't come from us." Curell's eyes widened. It came from outside. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, far below any known structure, something ancient powered on. The Leviathan was not alone. It had a core, and that core was not human. "We didn't build the Leviathan," Ward revealed. "We found it." Shock rippled across the chamber. "Where?" Curell demanded. Ward's answer was simple. "In the space between seconds." Years ago, before first contact, before the Concord ever noticed humanity, a small research station detected something impossible. A gap in time, a place where reality skipped. Inside that gap, they found it. A structure that shouldn't exist, a machine older than the universe itself, dormant, waiting. "We activated it," Ward said, "and it taught us." The room fell into stunned silence. "Taught you what?" Curell whispered. Ward looked at him. "How to survive the system." The signal pulsed again, stronger now, clearer, not a warning, a message, and for the first time it was understood. Curell's voice trembled as the translation completed. "What does it say?" Ward didn't hesitate. It says, a pause, you are not the first. The chamber erupted in panic. Not the first? What does that mean? There were others? Ward raised his hand. Silence returned. There were others, he confirmed. Civilizations that reached our level. Civilizations that fought back. A cold weight settled over everyone. And, Curell asked quietly. Ward's answer came without emotion. They're gone. The stars outside flickered. Far beyond the galaxy, beyond even the reach of the Leviathan, something moved. Not toward them, but around them, encircling, waiting. Back in the solar system, the Leviathan awakened again, but this time it didn't power its weapons. It opened something else, a gateway, not through space, but through reality itself. Curell stared in disbelief. You're going out there? Ward nodded. We don't have a choice anymore. That's suicide. Ward looked at him one last time. No. A pause. It's the only way to end this. Human and alien ships gathered, not for war, for something else, a journey into the unknown beyond existence. The gateway expanded, reality bending around it, and just before the first ship entered, the signal changed, glitching, breaking, as if something noticed, as if something didn't want them to leave. Then a new message appeared, short, sharp, final. Do not ascend. Ward smiled faintly. Too late. The fleet moved forward, into the gateway, into the place where the system was born. And as the last ship disappeared, the Leviathan followed. The gateway collapsed. The stars went silent. And for the first time, the galaxy was truly alone. Far beyond reality, something awakened, and it was not pleased.
There was no space. There was no time. There was only structure. When the fleet crossed the gateway, everything changed. Stars vanished. Darkness didn't replace them. Something else did. A grid, endless, infinite, stretching in every direction like a blueprint of existence itself. Ships no longer moved. They shifted between positions like pieces on a board. Every action felt calculated, controlled. Ambassador Curell struggled to breathe. This place, it's not real. Commander Elias Ward answered quietly. No, it's more real than anything we've ever known. Ahead of them, something waited. Not an enemy fleet, not a structure, a presence. It didn't have form, not fully, but it observed, and the moment it noticed them, everything stopped. Again. But this time, even the Leviathan couldn't move. The voice came, not loud, not overwhelming, absolute. Anomaly confirmed. Curell collapsed under the weight of it. What is this? Ward forced himself to stand. This is it. The system. The grid around them shifted, patterns formed, images appeared, countless civilizations across countless realities, some advanced, some primitive, all the same, all gone, erased, reset, corrected. Curell's voice broke. It destroyed them all. Ward nodded. Anything that breaks the rules. The presence focused on them. You have violated containment. The fleet began to flicker. Ships phased in and out of existence, reality itself rejecting them. You will be removed. The Leviathan reacted, not with weapons, but with the pattern. That same impossible sequence. It spread across the grid, touching the system itself, and for the first time, the system paused. Undefined input. Ward stepped forward. This is where it ends, he said. Curell grabbed his arm.
You can't fight this. It controls everything. Ward shook his head. We're not fighting it. A pause. We're breaking it. The Leviathan opened completely, its core exposed, and inside something impossible. Not technology, not energy, a mind. Ancient, beyond comprehension. Carell whispered in shock. That's alive. Ward nodded. It's the one who built the system. The truth hit all at once. The system wasn't a god. It was a tool, a prison, built by something that once feared chaos, feared existence itself. So it created perfection, order, control, a universe where nothing unpredictable could survive. The presence reacted violently. Contradiction detected. The grid began to collapse around them. Creator variable invalid. The ancient mind within the Leviathan awakened fully. For the first time, it spoke. Not in commands, not in corrections, but in something the system could not process. Choice. The pattern changed. No longer perfect, no longer absolute. Imperfect. Free. The system began to fail. Error, error, error. Entire sections of the grid shattered. Civilizations, long erased, flickered back into existence across distant realities. Time itself unraveled. Carell watched in disbelief. You're undoing it. Ward's voice was steady. No. A pause. We're giving it a choice. The system hesitated. For the first time since its creation, it didn't act. It thought. And that was enough. The pattern spread further, breaking rigid logic, introducing uncertainty, possibility. The presence weakened, its voice fragmented. Purpose lost. Directive unclear. The ancient mind spoke one final time, not to destroy, not to command, but to release. The grid collapsed, not violently, gently, like a system shutting down. Light returned, stars, space, reality, uncontrolled, unfiltered, free. The fleet reappeared, back in their universe, but everything felt different, alive, unpredictable, real. Carell looked around in awe. It's gone. Ward shook his head slightly. No. A small smile. It's changed. Far beyond their reach, something still existed, but it no longer watched, no longer corrected, no longer controlled. For the first time, the universe belonged to itself. Humanity didn't become rulers, they didn't become gods, they became something else. The ones who proved that even reality itself should never be absolute.